Welcome everybody to CIMM's first deep dive seminar of 2024. We are incredibly delighted to have an incredible lineup of speakers to talk to us about a topic that's relevant, pressing, and particularly interesting to a very wide range of industry participants, and that's the role of VID models in the future of measurement. I think it's probably fair to say that the role of VID models has been that has been raised in terms of profile and attention by the work of the WFA and by particularly the ANA and the Project Origin folks over in the UK, who are obviously using the VID model approach as part of the Halo Summit. We're super delighted, therefore, to have this opportunity to really go deep into how the models are being used, their applications and genesis, what problems they solve for, and how they work in practice, and have an incredible lineup of speakers. Quick reminder about the format for the session. The session is genuinely an opportunity to go deep. It's also going to be very interactive. So we have 5 speakers lined up. If you would like to ask a question, please don't speak, post it in the chat or DM me, and then I will either bring you in for conversation or else ask the question to the commenter. We'll play it a bit fluid in terms of whether we ask en route or whether we save them all up for the end of the presentation. But please don't pipe in directly. We're going to try and give the presenters a chance to speak, and then we'll pick the questions up as we go. But do get involved. This is a great chance with some incredible expert companies to talk about VID models and their role. If you're not speaking, please do mute yourself. That would be hugely appreciated. It just stops the kind of unnecessary noise on the soundtrack. One other thing just to say is that we will look to share all decks. The session is going to be recorded and circulated, but only to CIMM members. So bear that in mind. So without further ado, I'm incredibly excited to welcome our first speaking business to the floor, our friends at Arima. I first met Chris Williams at an event in Canada, and we've got to know him and his excellent team very well, and super interested to hear what they have to say. Chris and team are going to provide a general introduction to what a VID model is and how it can be used in measurement. And directly after Chris, we're then very delighted to have our last minute speaker edition. Matt Green from the WFA will talk a bit about the genesis of the Halo model and why they selected a VID model approach as part of their framework. So let's start off. Chris and team, over to you. Now you should be able to share slides.
All right, well, thank you so much. Just clicking the button here. So as you can see my screen, is it in?
You're all good.
All good. So thank you, John, and thank you, Tamika, for the opportunity to talk about VIDs. It's obviously for us a very exciting area of development. A little bit about us is just we've been running a VID model since about 2020 in Canada, United States. We use them for a lot of different things, including on the data science platform. A little bit about us. Winston Lee is the ex-lead of data science at Omnicom here in Toronto. I'm Chris Williams. I've been in digital for about 30 years. I'm the ex-president of IAB Canada for a number of years, and then after that, I was over at ACA, which is the equivalent of the ANA, but in Canada. And also on the team is a colleague that I've worked with for a long time, T.S. Kelly in New York, who's ex-EVP of Media Effectiveness at Dentsu for many years, and also worked at Alfonso on the ACR data. I wanted to bring forward some of the key points to think about as we're talking about VIDs, especially for broadcasters, is that one of the key things is that there's this real focus on media currency, like the actual transaction. And I'm thinking that this blinds the broadcasters, the actual value that the broadcasters bring to the whole market. And that value is being seen by Google and advertisers at the data science level instead of the media currency level. And I'll explain a lot more about that. But it's based on VIDs. We also have to think about how VIDs solve the advertiser's problem. And then I think the conclusion would be that, as an industry, we really should support our associations and work with the ANA's direction in around cross-media measurement and what the WFA is doing in multiple countries. There we go. So just very quickly, just to remind people, 6 years ago, the WFA puts out the advertiser's North Star in terms of cross-media measurement. I just wanted to point out 2 things. full life cycle measurement. It's not just about deduplication. The original intent, of course, is the scope, planning, reporting, and optimization, and that also comprehensive, not just video, but also all types of media can fit into vid models. And not to get, Matt's going to do a much better job of looking at this, but I just wanted to point out single source panel, it turns into a virtual ID model. The way that we do it is we actually use more than a single source panel. We can bring in many different sources of data. Some can come from JICs if they participate with us. Some can be private data, some can be survey data, but it can be all cross media going into what we call a national synthetic population. We call it a synthetic society, all made up of virtual IDs. And then there's multiple functions that can come out of the vid. So we're looking at using bids in the vid request. We use bids for the basis of media planning and consumer insight. And we can share bids with broadcasters and media vendors to say this is the target audience that we're after. So a little bit, let's explain what a vid structure is at the very beginning. Just think of a giant spreadsheet. And on all of the rows are all the numbers of the virtual ID from starting at 1 down to the full number of the population in the country. So if the United States adults, 330 million rows in this vid structure. And then, of course, all columns are attributes that are assigned to each of the virtual IDs. And one of the most important columns, of course, is the second column where it's attached to geography. And in the United States, we use census block. And that allows us to take the full geographic structure of the country and assign the vids into the right locations across the country and know how many vids fit into each different area. From there, we assign all of the other attributes like gender, household income, media usage, all of that gets assigned through a process called sync. And that becomes important because it preserves the correlations between things and makes the data useful as we start to look up into the model and how it works. If you're interested in sync, we're happy to share the white paper that Winston wrote that explains the whole sort of science behind it. Just email me and I'm happy to share that. But what it leads us towards is our first sort of conclusion is that vids drive what we call an advertiser-defined audience. They can define the audience any way they want based on whatever attribute is in the system. And so those thousands of attributes can be defined and aggregated, and we can share those with the media vendors with no need for a clean room because we're talking about synthetic data. We're not talking about first-party data. And this is what it looks like in the platform. I've defined an advertiser-defined audience of high net worth cat owners that are near retail locations in New York. And so we have 11.8 million vids visualized on this map with indices of high concentration. And also we can overlay all sorts of things on top of this. So I've overlaid retail locations. When we think about the ability for an advertiser to say, what I'm really looking for are the right people in the right locations and layer in mobility data. We can look at it from a DM perspective, out-of-home perspective, terrestrial radio, all sorts of things can be layered on top of this visualization of the target audience based on virtual IDs. And we're doing this right now in Canada, the United States. Switching gears a little bit, let's talk about an advertiser's problem. And right now, walled gardens have been enormously successful from a media vendor perspective. And defining a walled garden as having these 4 functions, planning, buying, delivery, and conversion within their platform. They offer a proprietary audience and they have an outcome signal straight from conversion back into the planning. And this has been very, very popular and obviously has gathered billions of dollars of media money. The problem becomes when you have what we call YOGs, which is yet another walled garden. And every sort of retail media network has got their own conversion data and they've got their own audience data. Well, you end up as an advertiser having multiple YOGs that you have to deal with, and all of them have a different view of conversion, and all of them have different audiences, and it becomes very difficult for the advertiser. So we look to vids, and vids fuel up a media planning tool, which we can do 2 things. One is we can use the advertiser-defined audience without relying on the platform, and we can bring in MMM as the conversion signal, and of course, MMM is cross-media. So we're not relying on any of the walled gardens for that conversion data, and we can merge that data with the vid models and for the planning side, and now you have full MMM-based cross media planning that is you can optimize based on your actual business objectives of sales or acquisitions or whatever you're trying to do. Now that's the teal horizontal line, but of course at the same time, Matt's going to talk about the deduplication of cross-media measurement, between the different platforms. And so when you put those two things together that are happening concurrently, you can see how vids fuel both of them, and it becomes a very powerful visualization or a very powerful approach for advertisers to use in understanding how all of their different relationships happen, whether they're within walled gardens or not. We have to recognize, of course, that MMM is not the way it's been done in the 1950s. It's evolving very, very quickly right now because of things like cookie deprecation and how the browsers are dealing with more data and privacy laws. So we've had to live with Meta's Robin for a little while, and now we've got Google's Meridian, which is in the market. And not to push those products, but the point is that the focus on media currency is actually missing a huge amount of value that the broadcasters bring to the table, which is generating search intent. And obviously, something like Google's Meridian has an enormous amount of capture around search volumes and search by geography and all sorts of things that's being brought into their market mix modeling. Now, in order to do or conduct that market mix model, you really have to gather a lot of information about the broadcast buys. And of course, that means that they're not actually asking the broadcasters for any of that information. They're focused on the advertisers bringing that data into the market mix model. And so when you think about the sort of the data science level and what's possible with VIDs and MMM, it's a completely different game in understanding value that the broadcasters bring to the table. And I'm very concerned that the broadcasters are missing the view, and that the view is being seen by Google and being seen by others. So this broader context of advertiser success is critical in sort of participating in what's happening both with VIDs and MMM. Another side of using MMMs is beyond media. So we start off long before it becomes a marketer's problem. The business has to define, a business problem. They're going to create a product, and they have to understand, who's going to buy it, where will be the distribution, how much people will pay for it. So they're using virtual IDs as the basis of agent-based modeling to answer these business questions. And once they get to a place where they feel comfortable about developing those products and move ahead, then it becomes the marketer's problem to say, well, what's this product's position and which media will generate awareness that lead to interest in sales along the way? And they use VIDs to do that. And of course, when you look at the whole ecosystem, starting from business problem to, business outcomes or sales outcomes, all of these things can rely on virtual IDs at every step along the way, except for one, and that is media currency. And right now, media currency is sticking out like a sore thumb. And so that's a problem. And so in some cases, of course, you have digital that can sort of merge with virtual IDs a lot easier because they're at the individual level. But other types of media currencies are stuck right now. And so we need to unstuck that. So just in conclusion, the advertiser really is thinking cross-media, and they're thinking at the data science level, and their outcomes are market mix models, and they can use virtual IDs for their advertiser-defined audiences. And that's really what we believe is where the game is at in terms of the use of data science instead of currency as so much. We think that there's a potential problem where the broadcasters are offering sort of like wholesale currencies, which are divvied up and turned into custom currencies by intermediaries, where an advertiser really wants to have a very defined audience and very defined metrics around what they buy and how they evaluate that. And I think that might be a longer term problem. I think, again, the focus on media currency is blinding the broadcaster the value that Google and the advertiser will be seeing at the data science level. So at the end, I think, the key thing is to really work and look at what the ANA is doing in this vid operability that they're developing. It's a very, very strong approach and it needs to be explored. So thank you for your time, and I'll pass it over to the.
Great, thank you, Chris. I think we have one pertinent question just before we bring in Matt Green.
Sure.
So Tom Weiss asked a great question. How do you ensure that synthetic IDs are not so close to real people that they're effectively PII? If I'm the only person living in Ojai, California, with a certain set of attributes, isn't that vid effectively me?
This is a question, I mean, in the sense that the thing is sort of like discovery. Like if you can match something, do you discover a new piece of information about a person using a virtual ID? I mean, the devil's in the details about how virtual IDs are created and how they're built up through looking at aggregate data and the distributions of things and the correlations of things, as opposed to bringing in any PII into the system. And so you get into a place where, we're actually creating fictional characters. And so the fictional character could obviously look somewhat like somebody, but the point is that it wasn't developed to look, like it doesn't involve that person's PII at the beginning of the process.